we have Mark Webb's new disaster, Snow White, a film that is plummeting at the box office, a film that is hastily being swept under the rug by the mass Disney Corporation. The film sees former Princess Snow White banished from the kingdom by an evil queen who has usurped her way into greater power. This film is very interesting, Reuben. I went to see it and I was alone in the cinema. I think there's a lot to be said about this film because it is the hot button political topic film. It's Disney gone woke again, which is agonizing that this type of language and this type of conversation about these Disney films just continues. It's a nightmare, I think. So I'd like to hear your perspective, not only about the film, but maybe about the wider situation happening with this version of Snow White.
Yes, so I think this is exactly the headline that I've seen a billion times over that sort of made me, sick to my stomach. The words Snow White, woke and disaster coupled together. The number of sort of, Daily Mail articles I've seen about this makes me feel ill. But actually, I think that a lot of the, the bad press that it's getting is hiding the fact that the film itself is fairly okay, honestly. There has been a huge amount of controversy, and some of it I think completely rightly so, when this remake was announced, and crucially, this is just called Disney's Snow White. It's not called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because there was a reluctance and a hesitance to really delve into the politics of representing the kind of the dwarven characters that we see in the 37 original on screen in the same way. When this film was announced, Peter Dinklage, who's obviously, he's a little person, there was an interview in which he talked about the fact that this was a very regressive piece of storytelling and it was fundamentally othering. And I think, that's an important conversation to be having, and it's good that he brought it up. Similarly, there have been people criticising the casting of those characters in the film because in an attempt to sidestep any controversy, the decision was made to do the same as what was done with Hugh Grant in Wonka. Actors of average height are cast in these roles and then kind of CG'd into more fantasy dwarf characters, more like you'd see in Norse mythology. So there's been a lot of interesting kind of conversations happening about that, which I think are valuable. What I don't think are very valuable are the conversations that have been happening about the casting of Rachel Zegler as Snow White. And the reasons for that are entirely because, people who are racist think it is unreasonable that an actress has been cast who doesn't have Caucasian white skin. She's of Colombian descent, she's a Latina actress, she does not have white skin, and therefore they're up in arms. They think that's outrageous, they think this is too woke, and frankly I have absolutely no time for those complaints. I think that's incredibly racist and utterly proven to be stupid, because Rachel Zegler is by far and away the best part of the film. She is a shining star. She continues to be absolutely brilliant in everything she does. I love her in West Side Story. I think she's absolutely terrific. And listen, she's even good in things like Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which is a film that I have time for. I had a decent amount of fun with, but I know that a lot of people really hate. I think she's great. She's really good as Snow White. It's a shame that the film around her isn't up to the same standard. And certainly a lot of criticism has been directed to her sort of co-star of sorts, which is Gal Gadot playing the evil queen. I think, again, people feel that her performance is incredibly hammy. I've seen a lot of Go Girl Give Us Nothing memes. I thought, honestly, she was pretty decent. There's been a lot of very obvious and visible kind of political clashing between the two leads. Rachel Zegler very vocally voicing support for Palestine in the war in Gaza, and Gal Gadot as a former member of the IDF advocating for Israel. And I think that's, engendered a huge amount of political visibility for this film, but also it has, I think, engendered a real level of kind of negativity and discourse on both sides. It's been boycotted by people on both sides of that debate, which I think is definitely a big part of its box office struggles. But I have to say, I thought that both of them were good. I thought they both gave excellent performances. I've seen criticism of Gal Gadot's singing. I thought it was perfectly fine. I didn't think it was exceptional. I thought it was just the right degree of hammy, honestly. If we're getting these unbelievably lazy, in my opinion, live action remakes. At least try and do something interesting with the story, at least try and cast it interestingly. And to be honest, I think they did do that. You know, they've changed the third act. Another woke move, guys. They've changed the third act of Snow White. What is the world coming to? But I mean, they've made it much more interesting. They've made it much better. In this version of the story, she becomes a kind of figurehead for revolution, and I enjoyed that. And I thought Rachel Zegler played it really well. Interestingly, given that she's cast opposite Gal Gadot, I thought that her appearance on screen was interestingly reminiscent of Gadot's performance as Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is a character who just exudes goodness and purity of heart from every pore, and that's a very, very similar role to the one that Rachel Zegler is performing here as Snow White. You know, she is white as snow in terms of her heart. You know, she's so generous, she's so kind, she's so good, and we get all of that from the performance that Rachel Zegler is giving in absolute spades. So I really enjoyed the performances all the way through the film. I thought Zegler was great. I thought, you know, the singing was broadly pretty good across the board. I thought it was perfectly okay as a live action remake, with the exception of one perhaps crucial factor, which is the dwarves, which I have to say I think are uncanny valley nightmares. I absolutely hated them every second that they were on screen. They look very, very fake and quite creepy and quite dead behind the eyes in a way that I found very distracting and not remotely charming. So my enjoyment of this film was massively divided into sort of two sections, which is the first half an hour where there are, you know, none of the seven dwarfs in sight, and the final 30 minutes again where they're nowhere to be seen. And the middle, I think, is where it gets really into sort of muddy sort of, oh gosh, this is a lot of CG and it looks very rushed territory, and that's sort of for me where the film's problems lie, are in that middle section. It's a strange film. I like parts of it a decent amount, I like other parts of it not at all. So I think it balances out at being completely okay. Unnecessary, but if you're going to remake Snow White, at least make quite a different film, and they have done that. So, you know, kudos, I guess, to Mark Webb and Disney.
I think my esteemed co-host has made some very great points. He succinctly talked about the controversy, and I won't divulge on it. I think Rachel Zegler is the best part of the movie. She is perfect for Snow White. She has princess quality, the only good singing voice in the entire film. I will get onto that because this film, I think a lot of people expect me to rant at the big dud this week, but no, I thought it was fine. I think it's a bit too bland to have a kid's interest, but the Seven Dwarfs are terrifying.
They're awful, aren't they? They're absolutely awful.
There's such charming actors who they've got to voice them. You've got Jeremy Swift from Ted Lasso. You've got Titus Burgess, Toby Kleber as well as Grumpy, and all give decent vocal performances, you know, as you'd expect for the Seven Dwarfs. Dopey, who's supposed to look like this very cute character, is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Every time he smiles, it's kind of gross. And then controversially, which I will spoil, is that Dopey speaks, which he never did in the original film. I'm just like, why are people so up in arms about this? Because did you really care about a movie from 1937 that much? It's not like the killing of Han Solo. It's not like making Doctor Who the original Gallifreyan. It doesn't really matter. It's just it's a movie. They changed some stuff. It's a pivotal moment that Dopey has to speak to spur on the others. It's not rewriting history. It's not. There's been far more controversial things. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again the other day, and I was like, that rewrites the entire real history, and no one thought that was a bad thing. Maybe some. The film is just very bland, and that's where my real criticism comes in. I don't think Gal Gadot is good. I think she is hammy in sort of the wrong way. It just seems to be going too far in one way and not far enough in the other. It doesn't seem like she's having any fun, but yet she's giving it a bit too much compared to everything else. It doesn't quite work. But this brings me on to the real problem with the film, which is that the music by Pasek Paul is absolutely terrible. Terrible in the sense that it is bland. It feels like a rip-off of Moana. The main song, Waiting for a Wish, is just How Far I'll Go Again. The same chords, I think. Same chord structure as well. The music is typical Pasek Paul. It's just stomp, stomp, clap, whoa, 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 whoa. And then the villain song is so drab and doesn't really have anything to say. It doesn't offer anything. It doesn't use Gal Gadot's singing voice very well. There should have been a big credit on this film that says, thank you to the auto-tuning machine, the Vocal Vox 9000 that was working overtime in this film. The bandit, who is not the prince, played by Andrew Burnap, I'm not sure if he could sing because he might have had a decent voice, but it was so synthesized I couldn't tell. And Gal Gadot was, oh my days. People should stop telling these famous actors who already are famous for acting that they can also sing if they can't, or give them lessons. You spent 260 million on this film and you couldn't afford some singing lessons? My musical theatre friends, if they go and see this, will hate the form of Gal Gadot. It's very forced. And this was such a cliche movie because I know Snow White very well, but also in the sense that every single beat, you can tell when a song's coming on because they have that slight brief pause where it's like, Gal Gadot's not going to sing, is she? And then she starts singing. I was like, oh gosh. Of course, a lot of people argue about the wokeness, and of course they're changing a lot of the love stories between the princesses and what were originally their princes to make them a bit more modern. And I was like, well, that's good, because a lot of these stories are a little outdated. The way that Disney will often do this, it's not in a woke way, they just make it slightly more boring and inconceivable how they fall in love. They could just allow people to have some genuine performances that aren't forced. I think Beauty and the Beast was the same. Well, we have to add all these layers because we don't want accusations of Stockholm Syndrome. You could just write it better, because I don't think in any of the Disney live-action remakes has there actually been decent chemistry between the two leads. Same in this one. They fall in love quite quickly over a rather bland song. There should have been a bit more trust. I think with these films, they're just lazy. The lazy remakes, they just are banking on nostalgia, and it's not woke. It's just unimaginative. They haven't learned any lessons, and I think they need to, because people are just going to go the wrong way and politicize all these films when in fact they're just not very good. So make them better so people don't have any right to make these stupid accusations or wild racist comments. They will, because racists do as racists do. So, Reuben, did you have high hopes for this film, or did it just sink like it has at the box office?
I mean, I actually disagree with you to a certain extent. I think that this is a perfectly fine watch for you to take your children to go and see, honestly. I think that they will be engaged. I think that the storyline is decent enough and that the performances are decent enough that I actually think they'll have a pretty good time. If I had children, I think I'd definitely be taking them to watch this over the Easter break, because it's fun, it's escapist, and I like the revolutionary turn that, Snow White takes. There's a scene in which, she sort of returns to the kingdom, and she's a bit like the man with no name at the end of A Fistful of Dollars. Oh, everyone thinks Clint's dead, but he shows up and he's got the iron breastplate underneath. I thought it was great. I liked the recasting of that figure.
She kind of looks like Luke Skywalker when she comes back at the end in this big red cloak. And also, for a revolutionary, they don't seem to understand the fact that their entire mining workforce are just 7 mythical creatures that don't seem to have a union. So, I mean, talk about woke Disney film. I don't think this is very good for trade unionist rights.
You know what? You're so right. Damn it! I want the Snow White version where everyone forms a union at the end and they get workers' rights. That's the Snow White I want to see. But as this isn't quite bold enough, it's less Snow White and it's more snow beige.